Hi guys, this discussion is going to be all about density, just a review of what it is and how to calculate it. So the first question we have is, what is density? So density is the amount of stuff we have per volume. So it's how much mass does a certain volume of something take up. So the first thing I want you to think about is which is heavier. Okay, so which has more mass? 1 pound of feathers or 1 pound of bricks? And now be careful with this because they both are 1 pound. Their masses are the same, right? They both are 1 pound. But if you picked up the feathers and you picked up the bricks, you're like, wait a second. Well, the bricks are denser. They have more mass in a certain volume, right? So if we had 10 milliliters of brick and 10 milliliters of feathers, the bricks are going to feel heavier because they are more dense. They have a higher mass per volume. So the equation for density is mass divided by volume. So density equals mass over volume. And remember, I showed you guys this triangle, and we have mass on the top. We have density down here on the left, volume down here on the right. So if you wanted to solve for density, right, you just cover up density, you do mass divided by volume. If you need to solve for mass, you cover up mass, you do density times volume. If you need to solve for volume, cover that up, you do mass over density, so mass divided by density. Okay, so your equation is always mass divided by volume. So the units can be any units that has your mass divided by your volume. So typically we're going to see grams per milliliter because mass is grams, volume is milliliters. So we would do grams over milliliters. This entire thing is the unit. Okay, it's not just grams, it's not just milliliters. Density is grams per milliliter. Or sometimes it's grams per centimeter cubed, because remember, 1 centimeter cubed is equal to 1 milliliter. Or we could also have something such as pounds per gallon. Those are using the English units. So will it sink or will it float? So this is a big, pretty much the most important application of density. So the density of water is 1 gram per milliliter. That's something that you need to know, right? You need to memorize that the density of water is 1 gram per 1 milliliter. So that means if you fill a graduated cylinder with 10 milliliters of water, that's going to have a mass of 10 grams. Make sure that you get in the habit of saying mass, not weight. Those are two different things. Okay, so mass is in grams. Now, something will sink if its density is greater than water. So looking up at this picture up here, this candle has a density greater than 1, right? So because it's greater than 1, it's going to fall to the bottom. It has more mass per volume, so it's going to sink. It's going to float if its density is less than that of water. So if its density is only 0.5, right? 0.5 is less than 1, 0.5 grams per milliliter, it will float on the surface. Okay, so something will sink if its density is greater than the liquid that it's in, which is usually water. It will float if the density is less than. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to take a look at a video that deals with density, and it's actually a really cool video.
Because mercury is a very dense liquid, a liquid so dense that cannonballs float in it.
So notice, mercury has such a high density. Okay, so this is where we're looking at this float. The liquid that the cannonball was in was mercury. The density of mercury was so high that even a cannonball's density was less than it. So because the density of the cannonball was less than that of the mercury, it floated. So how do we measure density? This is what you looked at in the discovery. I had you measure the density of copper and zinc and then also measure the density of water. So we're going to start by looking at how to measure the density of a solid. So remember, to find density you need mass and you need volume. So to find the mass of a solid, we just use a triple beam balance, right? You just take the solid over to a triple beam balance, read the mass. To find the volume of a solid, okay, you can do it one of two ways. The first way, if it's irregular, so it's not in a regular shape. It might be kind of shaped differently, have some chips in it, cracks in it. We would use water displacement. Okay, if you don't know what water displacement is, Google it because you should have done it in class twice already. Okay, so you would use water displacement for an irregular solid. If it's a regular solid, so it's just, like a brick, we can use length times width times height. This is why we can also use centimeters cubed, because we do centimeters times centimeters times centimeters, that gets us centimeters cubed. Now, if we want to find the density of a liquid, we still need mass and we need volume, right? Because to find density, we do mass divided by volume. So to find the mass of a liquid, we can't just pour a liquid onto the triple beam balance, right? We need to have something to hold the liquid. So what we actually can do is we can put the empty graduated cylinder on a triple beam balance and find the mass. Typically, it's going to work better if you use a smaller graduated cylinder because your mass isn't going to be as high. Then add whatever volume of water and find the new mass. Well, now we have the mass of the graduated cylinder and the water, and we have the mass of just the graduated cylinder, so we can subtract to get just the mass of the water. And then to find the volume, just read the volume from the graduated cylinder. So you just read it right off of the cylinder. So then how do we calculate density? Well, I told you already, density equals mass over volume, and we also have the triangle that we can use. Right, so if you are someone that likes shortcuts, this triangle is definitely a good shortcut. So density equals mass over volume. All right, just memorize that triangle. So what is the volume? So we are trying to find volume. Okay, so we need to solve for volume of a piece of metal that has a mass of 3.25 grams and a density of 1.82 grams per milliliter. So you can solve this one of two ways. You can just plug it into this density equation and you get 1.82, right? And we get grams per milliliter equals, your mass is 3.25 grams. And this is always the type of question that people miss because the algebra is off. So you can plug it in like this, or you can plug it into your triangle, right? Because if we plug it into our triangle, let me change colors here. Let's just put it in as black. So I'm solving for volume. So I'm going to cover up volume with my hand. To solve now, I do mass divided by density. Okay, so I'm going to be doing volume equals, right, because I'm solving for volume, that's why I cover this up, mass over density. Or you can actually solve this using algebra. So we would need to multiply both sides by volume because it's on the bottom. Okay, so now I have 1.82 times V. You divide by 1.82. Right, divide both sides. So 3.25 divided by 1.82. Notice it's still the same thing, grams per milliliter. So I'm going to do 3.25 divided by 1.82. Okay, so 3.25 divided by 1.82, I get volume equals, and I'm going to write it out to a few decimal places because I'm going to just remind you how we would round. 7, 8, let's do 5, 7. Okay, now notice my grams cancel out. I'm left with milliliters. So your volume is milliliters. Now, if I want to round this, let's just say to 2 decimal places. So I want to round to here. Make sure that you notice what is right after the 8. So because this is a 5, my 8 is going to round up to a 9. Okay, so it would be 1.79 milliliters. Okay, so just be careful with rounding. So 1.79 milliliters, that's our volume. That's how you solve for density.